Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about letting go of expectations and goals. When Yvonne and I met in the beginning of the year and talked about all of our topics, I think at the time I was really struggling with, and if I remember back, it was around the time that my daughter was telling me that she didn't want to go to a four-year school. She didn't want to go away to college. She wanted to go to a junior college this next year. She's graduating in a couple of weeks. And I was really personally struggling because you have these, as a parent, these ideas of like what you want your kid to do and like where they're going to go to college, and or maybe you have like dreams of your kids and like what kind of athlete they're going to be. I mean, I'm certainly like, I was like, when Hannah was little and she was really good at swimming, I was like, oh, maybe she'll be this Olympic swimmer. Yeah. And so, it's this thing that we deal with as a parent, and like when our kids actually get older and then they become an individual and they like, become themselves, it may not match up with what we had expected for them. And we have to, as parents, learn to let that go, because we want, of course, want our kids to live their own life and be their own person. So that's really where like this idea of this topic came from, just giving you guys a little background with this. But I think this is a really interesting topic. We touched on it a little bit last week when we were talking about health and fitness, about, our own, like setting realistic expectations for ourselves in our own life and our own like fitness, and health world. And then I think it also ties into the themes that we've talked about all year, with like this idea of acceptance, that like we're accepting where we are and where our kids are, and we're accepting our current reality. And so it's all ties together. So I really like this topic because I think it's a theme that we've been like touching on all year. And so hopefully we'll have a nice like wrap it all up. So Yvonne, what do you have to say about this topic?
Yes, the research on this one took me down like the rabbit hole of the different types of expectations. I mean, I had to like subcategorize it into like the expectations I have for myself, the ones that I have for my children, the one that people have for me, what others expect of me, the expectations of how my day's going to go. I mean, these are all things that lead to disappointment. And so this really stood out to me. And I was just like, there's so many quotes, because a lot of times when I do the research, I'll look up quotes for whatever our topic is. This one had so many good quotes. Like I could have put together a slideshow on it, like, oh, and they were all like very profound. But I decided to kind of focus on this. It's supposedly from a Thai Buddhist master. And it says, "Your glass is not empty or full, it's already broken. You see this goblet, this cup," the Buddhist master says. "For me, the glass is already broken. I enjoy it. I drink out of it. It holds my water. Sometimes it even reflects the sun in this beautiful pattern. But when I put the glass on the shelf and the wind knocks it over or my elbow knocks it off the table, it falls to the ground and it shatters. And I say, of course. When I understand that the glass is already broken, every moment I have with my glass is precious. Expectations make us suffer. Pretending that things will go our way creates unnecessary stress. Life is like a fragile glass. It will break sooner or later. Rather than expecting things to happen one way, enjoy them for what they are and while they last." And when I read it, I was just like,
wow, that's really deep for 9:00 in the morning.
I'm
like, wow.
It was really deep for like 2 a.m. last night. And it kind of like it just started me like again spiraling down this rabbit hole of the expectations that I have in my life, right? And one of the things that I think is really important to acknowledge when we have a conversation about expectations is, first of all, what is the definition of an expectation, right? And what is the difference between an expectation and a standard, right? We don't want to take all the expectations away from ourselves and from our kids, because then there's no goals, there's no push. And this says standards are facts. They are the baseline of quality that drives effective actions and good decision making. So that's a standard. So we can have standards for ourselves, for our children. Expectations come from within inside of us and can lead to disappointment when they're not delivered. So finding an intersection between the two is a challenge, right? So expectations is like my thought of what I believe is going to happen. So it's almost like I'm predicting the future, and when it doesn't go the way that I predicted, it leaves me feeling disappointed, right? Like, I don't know how everybody felt about when their kids were little and what I expected parenting to look like, what I expected my kids to look like when they were 18, and what the reality of it is. I think I didn't know how challenging it would be. I didn't know or factor in that my kids are all unique and they have different likes and different strengths. And so, this just really got me thinking about, I guess, like being let down in certain ways, but acknowledging that that was because of my own expectations, not because my kids are, less than I thought they would be. Yeah, I know this conversation is like so deep early in the morning. So I wanted to kind of start with like, what do you expect from yourself? Like, do you expect to be the perfect parent? Like, if you just think generally speaking, what are your expectations for yourself?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking all of us. Do we expect to be the perfect parent? Do you expect to have it all together? Do we expect to raise happy, successful kids? Keep a perfect house, look perfect, have healthy dinners on the table every night? Like, what is it that we expect of ourselves?
I think I expect of myself that in anything I do, I've given it all my effort. And that I've tried my hardest. And so that's something that, like, kind of tying back to our fitness discussion last week, something that I've struggled with and I'm learning to do more is that if I want to work out every day, I can't always give it 100%. My body won't do that. That my body needs to like recover. And so some days I need to give it like 60% effort. And that is what I need to do to take care of myself. And so that's something that as I've gotten older and like learning, like now I think my expectation is like shifted to I expect myself to take care of myself. And that could be like, with my health, my fitness, doing my self-care. It could be getting my hair done. I expect that I'm going to take care of myself.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that when I started to process, like, what do I expect for myself? I think like I expect myself to, like you said, do my best. I expect myself to put effort into everything I do. I expect myself to be, kind to others and respectful to others. And so as I'm thinking of all these expectations I have for myself, I started to think about the ones that I have for my kids. And they're not as broad as the ones I have for myself, right? They're much more specific. I expect my kids to have their room clean. I expect my kids to do good in school. I expect my kids to be productive members of the house. And it was interesting because I know that I've put expectations on myself in the past when I was younger that I could never attain, right? I should always be at this weight. I should exercise every day to the best of my ability. I should only put healthy things in my body. There are all these like very like direct ones. And I think over the years of so much like let down over not being able to accomplish certain things, I think I've learned that like, okay, I need to make them more broad, more general, like more manageable. But yeah, I still haven't quite made that shift for my kids. And I think it has something to do with like, like we want more for our kids than we did for ourselves, right? And I think that has been a big challenge, right? Like I want so much more for them. I want them to learn from all the lessons that I learned from so they don't have to go through what I did. But it doesn't work like that, right? And so I think, just processing all of this and, what is it that I expect from my kiddos? Like, what do we expect, and do they look different from what we expect from ourselves? And I know we've talked a lot about this, about our parenting style, right? Miss Davis and I tend to not be, pushing for perfection from our kids. And I thought we had like this novel idea, but it turns out there's an author that kind of beat us to the punch.
Oh, we haven't invented it? Oh, no.
No, and this is what it's called. It's actually called the good enough parent concept. So I had no idea. So this is probably going to be our next book, but it says like, how good of a parent are you? Are you the perfect parent? And it talks about why it's important to not be the perfect parent. And it was kind of interesting. Let's see if I can find this little. So basically it was saying, if you're the perfect parent, your kid would never have opportunity for growth. If you always gave your baby what it needed, a bottle immediately, it would never cry and know that advocating for itself would be helpful. So it's just this idea that, whatever is the best you can do, being the good enough parent is actually healthier for your children. Being a good enough parent doesn't mean that you're giving up on being a committed parent. It just means that we accept our flaws and we know that we have limitations. And I loved that. I was like, this is what we've been talking about, right? Like that we don't have to be the perfect parent, and that, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of a good enough parent.
Yeah.
Sounds bad even when I say it out loud.
But then again, like that's like when you say like it sounds bad, like cause like that's butting up against your expectations for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually love this, and if I think about it, I think like it's been my philosophy of life. Like that's good enough. I mean, in school, I was a solid B student. I probably could have gotten straight A's. I did not strive to it because I was like, a B is good enough.
Yeah.
It's fine. And my parents didn't put those expectations on me that I was getting straight A's. And so I was like, that's fine. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, but it can be like, when do you push out of that and like actually push yourself, because when you're always good enough, maybe strafing off topic and I'm just like, like getting a little philosophical here. But like when you're always good enough, like, did you never like push yourself to see like what could be your potential? Now, maybe with parenting, that's a bad example, but like, in your job, like if you like have a job that you're like, the level I'm at is good enough. Like, I don't need to go for that promotion or have that responsibility. And like, this is fine. But like, who knows what you could actually accomplish and do, right?
And I think the idea of like the good enough parent is not to like not push yourself and not be the best you can be, but to really set the goals and expectations in a manner that incorporates the fact that you have to sleep, you have to take care of yourself, you have to do all these things, and accept that some days there's not going to be enough time to do everything perfectly. So it's like you can still push yourself to do these things, but I think sometimes we set such unrealistic expectations of ourselves. Like, I think I should be the perfect social worker, also have dinner on the table, spend quality time with my kids, exercise, do all these things. And the reality of it is that something always has to give. There's only 24 hours a day. I hope to sleep 8 of them. And I have to be okay with the fact that something's going to give. We can't do everything perfectly and function to the best of our ability. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of the idea of it, of like, I can do things well, but I can't do things if there's just not enough hours in the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's kind of the idea. And, in other expectations we have of ourselves is like, I don't know if you've ever felt this, but like, I'm so blessed to have kids. I'm so happy to have kids. I should always be happy about it. And I should always be in a good mood. Well, That's not really reality. So when I find myself like frustrated with my family or my kids, I really start to like feel bad and feel guilty when feeling frustrated during parenting is just a normal part of parenting, right? So it's even as far as like the expectations we set for ourselves to enjoy every minute of parenting. Like it's okay to not to not do that. I think so. I think it's just like, again, like that radical acceptance. Like I accept that this is tough and that I'm doing the best that I can. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to push my kids to do more, but I'm also not going to put all of my hopes and dreams into hoping that they accomplish that.
Right.
So, so I had subcategorized this into like, what do you expect from yourself? And then what do you expect from your children? And how do we separate standards versus expectations? For me, a standard is having a clean room, right? And it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. It shouldn't be at the level of like housekeeping. I expect them to try their best. I expect them to be kind and treat people with respect. Those are my standards for them. My expectations for them are to listen to my advice. This is what I was just like brainstorming, to listen to my advice, to get good grades, to keep open dialogue with me, to try not to make too many mistakes, to get into college, to make money. And then I was just being real with myself. Like, these are things that I thought, like, these are the things that I want for my kiddos. And I don't think that it's fair to put those on them. Maybe they don't want to go to college, right? Maybe they're more passionate about doing something meaningful than making good money, right? Maybe they don't have open dialogue with me because I don't let them feel safe having open dialogue with me. So I think it's just like, what are your expectations for your kiddos? And
I'm sitting here thinking about it, obviously, like, I expect them to be kind, and ethical. I expect them to, treat people fairly. And like, I do expect them to recognize injustice in the world, and to fight against that. But like, really, like, when it comes to like my expectations, I mean, I guess I expect them, I don't know if I expect them to do well in school. I expect them to try in school. But really, when I think about like jobs and college and all of that, I don't really have like, and like I said, like I had, started this day, I had expected my daughter was going to go to a 4-year school and all that stuff, and I've had to let that go. So like now when I think about the expectations I have for both of my kids, honestly, I'm at the point now I expect them to move out of the house someday and live on their own and support themselves. Because I don't want to, in my retirement, be supporting them.
I love that. I think perfect. I mean, that's pretty much the goal that I met for my parents when I was like in my 20s, right? Like I moved out, I got married, I moved out. But I think that is a fair goal. Like, I think it's a fair expectation.
Honestly, like, especially in this area, in this economy, like if they are able to like live on their own and support themselves, like that's huge. Like that's a really big thing.
That is huge. No, you're absolutely right. And it's kind of funny because when you say that, like you have to, my expectation is that you move out. There's going to be a lot of things that come along with that, right? They're going to have a job to move out, right? So that covers that. They're going to have to make money. That covers that. They're going to have to be responsible. That covers that. So it's like that expectation of them moving out kind of incorporates a lot of the things that we all want for our children. I think I like that. I think I want my kids to move out one day. I don't want to support them, and I want them to do something meaningful, right? I think that's my expectation for my kiddos, Let's see. So it talks about, expecting more from others than they can realistically provide can strain your relationships, can fuel conflict, can leave you and the other person just feeling really angry and resentful. And I think one of the things that I hear so much from students is, that they're trying their best, but they don't feel like maybe their families validate their effort, right? That they just feel like, I'm not meeting my parents' expectation, so everything that I've done up until this point is meaningless. And so I would say to parents, like, if you can sit with your kid and, create the list of, standards and expectations you have for them and have them be a part of that. Like, if somebody else puts expectations on you, we're less inclined to do them and it causes more pressure for us, right? And so I think having open dialogue with the kids about, like, what do you expect from them, and acknowledging their limits. Like, one of my kids is not good in math, so for me to expect that he gets straight A's is totally unfair. Right? It's totally unfair for me to expect that from him. So knowing what their strengths are and then using that as you guys have that dialogue to create those goals and expectations for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is really important, like in having that dialogue with your kids. But like when you first brought up this topic, I was, thinking about like, but also with your spouse or your partner, like what expectations do you have for that person and your relationship, or like running a house together, like running a family, like, like who has what roles, and are you communicating about that? Because I think a lot of times, like within a marriage, like a lot of disagreements and fights are when you don't communicate about those expectations.
And if you don't communicate and then you get mad about them, like for me, mine has always been like, why do I have to cook dinner when we both work? It's not something where we've sat down and really discussed it, but I find myself feeling angry and resentful every single day that I'm cooking dinner. So it's like I put these expectations on him, but never really shared them, but just like secretly get mad at him every day for it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like I have found myself that I will get angry with my husband about something, and then I have to, I kind of check myself, like, well, he does this, this, and this, and I haven't communicated that I would like him to support me with this. And so how can I expect that he's just going to automatically do it because I haven't asked for that?
And even in a partnership, even if it's something positive, one of the little stories I read, it was about this professor who just absolutely adored his wife, and he wanted to make her birthday really special. So he cooked her favorite meal. He had music playing. He did the candle lights. He was just all excited for her to come home and celebrate her birthday. And she had a long day at work. She came home and all she wanted to do was just take a bath and go to bed. And so he had set this beautiful dinner up, and he was so angry with her because he had set the expectation that that's what she had wanted for the day, right? When in reality, and she didn't know that, right? She just knew that she was exhausted and wanted to come home from work and take a bath and go to bed. And so it was just talking about like, excuse me, even when we're well-intended, our expectations of how other people are supposed to, want or act is on us. And so how many things do we have control over versus how many things are out of our control, right?
That's the reason I've always hated like surprise parties, because like what if the person because especially since I'm such an introverted person that if anybody threw me a surprise party, I'd be horrified because I need to like mentally prepare myself for that and like get in the right headspace. And because I would totally be the person that would come home and be like, I just want to go to bed and read my book. I don't want to do all this.
Totally. And I'm sure Paul knows that about you and wouldn't do that. But
he knows that now. But like honestly, like again, like it comes to the communication and like having to be like really like, this is what I need.
Absolutely. Like for me, it's like, don't make dinner reservations on a work night, even if it's sweet, it's my favorite restaurant. Like I just want to come home and do nothing. And so I love that like communication about what we expect from one another. One of the things I kind of want to talk about is, what do our children expect from themselves? And, I could talk about my own children, and right now I don't know that they are expecting a lot from themselves, but I think of it more from the perspective of the kids that I work with. What do they expect from themselves? And this is a kind of a list of things that I've heard over the year that from kids, what they expect. to get into a good school, to not struggle in their classes, to not be the only one in their class that's struggling, to not feel sad, to not be a burden to their family. A lot of times I'll ask, if it's okay to get parent consent for counseling, and they'll say, no, because I don't want to burden my mom. So they expect that they shouldn't be an added burden to their family. And another one is for things to come easy to them. And these are really high expectations because, again, everybody's different, right? So I always want to know, like, where did these expectations come from? Are we guilty as parents? Is it just a society thing? Is it a peer thing? What do you see from maybe not even your own kids, but just kids in general, of what they're expecting of themselves? And is it even feasible?
I think parents get a bad rap with this because I think a lot of times parents get the blame for when kids have these high expectations for themselves. And it wasn't until my daughter became a teenager, my son is almost a teenager, but like really seeing it manifest in her, these high expectations and just, what she felt like she had to do, the classes she had to take in school, the grades that she had to get. And I've had conversations with her like, whoa, I never said you had to do all that. But she just, and I think a lot of it is peers. But I don't even necessarily want to blame the peers because I think it's societal. I really do. I mean, this is actually a topic that I've thought a lot about, in my position of running a school, and like, how do we confront this? Because it does cause a lot of problems with our kids when they can't live up to those expectations, and how do they cope with that? It's horrible for them. And so I think that as society, and I don't know when it shifted. I feel like when I was in high school, I graduated from high school in 1992, but and I went to a private high school. And so there was certainly this expectation that everybody goes to college. But I feel like it was in the 90s where when I was starting my career, that in education, there was this focus that we need to create education to make everybody go to college. And so, because if you go to college and you get a college degree, that's success. There's all those studies that well, you're not going to make this much money if you don't go to college. And so we want, the kids that we're, educating to be successful. And so they need to do this. And so, I think that, that's only giving one definition of success, right? And so there's so many flaws with this philosophy, but this is a philosophy that has driven education for the past, 20, 30 years.
Yep.
And so I do think it's societal, that it's just, this is what it means to be successful, that you take these classes, you get these grades, and so that you get into this college. And that not every kid's going to fit into that mold. Some kids do, and that's great for them. Some kids totally fit into that mold, but a lot of kids don't. I was having I don't remember actually who I was talking to, but it was last week. It was a really interesting conversation about, the policies that we have in regards to kids and AP courses, and, how we design these policies. And I feel like we design policies for the really high achieving kids in our school and in our society. And so then everybody has to strive to that, rather than making policies that can fit everybody. And then maybe you make some exceptions for those high achieving kids.
Right.
But it's just, and I struggle with this because it is such a huge, because it is societal. And how do we really confront that? I think having conversations like this and continuing to have conversations like this are really, really important, which is why I always want to let's talk about this and see what everybody, as a community, that we can do to fight this, because it is a big problem.
And I love that you said that. Our parents have taken so much heat on this topic. And the more I work with families, the more I'm realizing that there's so many parents that are just I just want my kid to be happy. I just don't want my kid to not feel suicidal anymore. I don't care about the grades. And it's the kiddo that can't let go of that. And it was never more evident than this school year with admissions, because we have kids who did everything that they're supposed to do. There's this narrative: you do good, you get perfect grades, you do all your, extra stuff for your application, and you get into a great school. And we have students who did all of that. They followed that guideline, and there just was not enough space, like the Berkeley College of Engineering. There is such limited space. I can think of 20 kids off the top of my head that want to go into that program. And, because everything was like impacted this year and there was extra applicants and all these things, it kind of like shook kids as like, I learned my whole life that this is what I'm supposed to do to get to this goal. And here I am, I did all of that. What's wrong with me? Why did somebody else get in and not me? I mean, I have students who got into certain schools and are terrified to tell their peers that they did, because they know the pain and suffering that their friends are going through because of it. And so I'm hoping that this has kind of caused like an awakening of like, you can do all the things that are expected of you to get into this perfect, school, this UC or this Ivy League, and still it's not enough because there's just, quite frankly, not enough space, and so I've been working with a lot of students about, how to handle that rejection, how to process the fact that you did everything you were told you were supposed to do and it wasn't enough. It was one of the counselors that gave me the idea to have students write a rejection letter to their rejection. And it's basically like a letter to tell the school of like why you're missing out, because I think people forget that they are, valuable despite the decision of the school, and so my hope is that because of this year, there is a little bit of like a societal shift on the focus of getting into that school, because you could do all those things and have it not happen. So.
Right. I think that this is just something that, I guess this push for college, and I just see like schools, and, I've certainly been part of it too, where like teachers, like, I know when I was a teacher here, like every Thursday, and I don't know if they still do it. I haven't actually seen a lot of teachers in person for the past year. So, but like every Thursday they would wear their college t-shirts. I know when I was teaching here, like that's what every Thursday I would wear my college sweatshirt. And, you put up like, this is where I went to college. And it's like the idea of like, letting kids know like all the different stuff out there, but maybe I feel like we're pushing this too much. That like going to college and going to a 4-year college is an admirable, totally acceptable goal, but it's not for everybody. And it is, just like, there are other options. I like Amy, you're absolutely right. She says we're in Silicon Valley. It's not just the local site, it's global competition, which makes it harder on kids and parents here. Absolutely. It is, and I think that that's something that we forget a lot about living in this area, that it is, and I think that we are all, as people that live here, just kind of like living under this constant stress of being here and like keeping up and like doing enough so that we can survive here. And I think that we like don't even realize the pressure that we all are under on a constant basis with this. I mean, I feel very secure in, my job and my position within Eastside. But, I'm like, I've had like thoughts that like, oh, because, I don't live close to where I work. And so people have asked me like, well, why don't you look at districts, closer to home and blah, 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 blah. Not that I ever want to leave my house, don't worry. But, this is stuff that I've thought about. But honestly, like in my mind, I'm like, well, I have a reputation in the district and I have job security in my district. If I go to a new district, I wouldn't necessarily have that. And that's a scary thing. And so because I live here, and how would I survive if I didn't have my job? Like, I wouldn't be able, and like, so that just that, and like, I think that, Amy, the point that you're making, that is so, it's something that we have to think about, because I do believe that there's pressures and different pressures of raising a family here and raising a kids here than if we lived in like, I don't know, Montana or something like that. That it is just a different level of expectations.
Absolutely. I think it became really evident when the pandemic happened, if everything just slowed down. And I kind of wondered, like, do we in Silicon Valley feel it more than some people just because of the rat race that is Silicon Valley? It really just like everything came to a halt. And I think it's given people a lot of time to think about what's important. How do I really want to spend my time? Is it worth all the like hustle and bustle to, to do what we do? And I don't know that it is. Like, this past year, all I could think about is like starting a farm and living this like slower life.
No, I was about to say that, like, because I think I've made no secret that I'm a big reader, and like that is my escape, that I read trashy novels. But I just finished not too long ago this like series of romance novels. They were great. But they are all about these dairy farmers in Vermont, and they live this like simple life of like being dairy farmers. And I was like, it just sounds amazing. Like just like being out in some land, and like, and I'm sure it's super stressful, and like, like it's not an easy thing, but it sounded so lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I hope that there's going to be changes from this. I had a student not too long ago tell me, I don't think I want to go to regular college. I want to be a welder. There's welders in my family. And when he said it to me, it was very difficult for him to make eye contact with me. Like there was shame in it. And I, kind of pushed to like question that. And his reaction was something like, I was worried to see that you would be disappointed, is why he didn't want to make eye contact with me. And that absolutely broke my heart, because if you have a passion and a dream for something, but you just feel like the expectation is to go to college and that's not for me, like how badly does he feel, to not even be able to celebrate the fact that he found out what he loves and what he wants to do. And it broke my heart. And I wondered, like, how many people feel that way? How many people are going to college because they're supposed to? I have one of the expectations kids have from themselves that I had shared is to not struggle in their class. Like that's a huge expectation that kids put on themselves, when in reality, the struggle is part of the learning process, right? And so, all these expectations are just completely like unrealistic.
Right? Yeah. And I think that, what kids do within themselves, and I've had my daughter talk to me about it. Like, she's like, oh, well, in that class, all the kids are so smart. I never want to say anything because they're all like so smart. And like, I just don't want like them to think I'm dumb. And so, and I feel like in conversations I've had with students at Piedmont Hills, because we've done some focus groups where we have asked them, we've asked students like, and this was actually really surprising to me. We had asked students like, why don't you ask questions in class? Like, why aren't you doing this? And I fully thought that like they were intimidated by the teacher, that they thought the teacher wasn't going to be supportive. Like I was like already, like I was looking for evidence to get on our teachers about like, you need to be more supportive. But time after time, every time I asked a student this question, the answer was, I don't want my peers, I don't want the other students to judge me. They are not afraid of the teacher. Like if they were one-to-one with the teacher, they are totally like willing to like ask teacher all the questions and get all the help. They aren't going to do it in a class because they don't want the rest of the students to judge them. And like that's where I'm like, how do we break through with that? Because what they don't realize is every single student in the class is feeling like that. They think they're the only ones.
Like, how do we normalize asking for help? Like a big part of my job is going with students to talk with their teachers to ask for help. Like hand holding, because it's just not intuitive. It's scary. It feels like you're disappointing the teacher. Like I'll kind of like push like, okay, what is the fear? Where are you afraid that you're going to say something wrong? No, I'm afraid that, they're going to think I'm dumb. I'm afraid that, they're not going to understand that I need extra help. I'm afraid that they're going to think differently of me. When it's like asking questions is like one of the hugest skills you can have in life, right? There's so much stuff about social work I don't know, but having the ability to ask has been so helpful for me. But we, our kids just don't feel or have too much expectation that they're supposed to know everything already. And so that failure that provides, experience and knowledge, they don't have, and it's scary actually.
Yeah. I mean, so I think maybe, kind of like circling back to our topic, like, how do we let go of expectations? Maybe the answer is like, you let go of an expectation by setting a new expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So, trying to teach our kids to let go of the expectation that they never need help or they never have to ask for help, and like instilling the expectation of you are always going to ask for help. You are always going to ask questions. And I don't know how to do that, but like that, I think is a pretty big goal that we should have.
I've heard conversations with like staff are like, how do we get kids who go in the library to get homework help to actually ask for help? Like, how do we normalize that behavior to say that I don't know the answer and I need some extra support? I don't know. Like, I don't even know how to. I think these kind of things are so broad and they're so just like we said, like it's societal issues. Like, I don't even know how to start. But I think, like you said, it's like having the conversations about it is how to start. And back to modeling, like asking questions when you don't know the answer. I just have a couple things of like how to manage expectations and how do we know that your expectations are too high? What are the signs to help you recognize if you have unrealistic expectations? And one of them is like you feel stressed or upset when things don't go planned. You find plenty to criticize in yourself. You fixate on little details that are super important to you when they don't go right. When things go wrong, even in a small way, you feel let down and frustrated. Maybe you have specific visions and find it difficult when the outcomes don't go the way that you had hoped. And so the first tip is, make room to appreciate what we have. And I want to like remind people, this isn't about like we want to like lower all expectations and not push our kids. It's nothing about that, but it's about not setting ourselves up for that frustration and disappointment. Make room to appreciate what you have. Spending most of our time focused on what we want makes it easy to lose sight of what we have. It's not to say that you shouldn't have goals or expectations. There's nothing wrong with that. But we also want to spend less time reaching and more time enjoying, that mindfulness, that present moment. Like, we don't really, maybe this year has been a little bit different, but generally speaking, we're so focused on tomorrow that we miss today. The next one is do some self-exploration. Expectations often stem from visions other people have for you. You might absorb these and carry them on. Maybe they don't align with who you are. There's certain things in my life that I know my parents want for me as a parent to do with my kids, right? Like they probably want us to be more religious or more this or more that. And that's not really what I want for myself. And so I have to be careful to know that the expectations I have are for me and from me. Consider whether or not your expectations truly resonate with you. Would achieving those goals fulfill you and bring you joy? If not, it might be easier to let them go and refocus your attention on reframing the goals that really matter. So even with our kids, like, is this for them? Is this for, for you? Maybe I am not a cook and maybe I don't want to cook dinner every night, And so to feel that disappointment every day of like, oh, I have to do this again. It's like, I do the best I can, but maybe that's not my goal for myself to be the next Julia Child, right? Like that's not me. So just exploring like what is for you versus what is because we want to be perceived a certain way or what's an expectation that somebody else put on us.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that that's important, like, to ask our kids, like when they are saying they want something, like, is that something you want for you or are you thinking I want that for you? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times I think our kids do things because they are seeking praise and validation from their parents. Kids like that actually drives our kids a lot, much more than we realize as parents, because we think that our kids don't care what we think, because that's what they tell us. And so it's like this kind of like weird dichotomy with our kids. Like they're saying one thing, but then in reality, they want validation from their parents most of all. That is absolutely what they want. And so a lot of times I think that they make choices, about courses to take or like what they want to do for a career or something like that, because they think that's what their parents want. And so I think, as parents, we have to, like, when we talk to our kids about this, like, really, make sure that it's something they want from themselves and not for us.
This one says, you can only control yourself. When setting an expectation, it can help to first ask yourself whether you actually have any control over the situation. And I was trying to think of like an example of when that happens. Yeah, like I can't control whether or not my kids are always happy, right? And I put a lot of pressure on myself to have kids who are doing really well, and when I try hard and I, spend time with them, yet they're still in a bad mood or they're still not, doing okay. That's a lot of pressure on me. And I have to like reset that of like, do I have control over my kids' happiness? No. Do I have control over my partner's happiness? No. Can I make everybody happy all the time? No. And releasing myself from that is actually very liberating.
Yeah, this is actually a really dumb example, but I'm going to say it anyway. Throughout my 20s, I had like really high expectations of how my New Year's Eve was going to go. And so I just thought it was going to be like the most fun ever. And, everything was going to be great. And it was like going to be the best time like ever. It was just going to be so much fun. And it never was. And it's because, like, and I think about like what you were saying, like, what can you control? You can't control the traffic. You can't control the music. You can't control the crowds. You can't control how other people are, going to react to something or what's going to happen. So there's just so many things that you can't control. And so I actually, like, I was about 30. I was like, I'm never going out for New Year's Eve again. And I stopped. Like, I always stay home for New Year's Eve because that's what I can control. I can control if I'm staying home, and what I choose to do with my evening, I can control, and I'm a lot happier for it.
I think that's a fantastic example. Man, that's stressful to like, then you're responsible for everybody being happy and having a good time, and you're not really enjoying it because you're so hyper focused on what's going on around you. I love that. That's a good one. Share your expectations. We talked about this a little bit. Like, I'm disappointed that my husband doesn't step up and cook, yet we've never had that conversation, right? And so making sure that there's good communication, that I'm sharing my hopes and wants. Keep a flexible mindset. One thing to remember about unrealistic expectations, they're very rigid. So in reality, circumstances can change quickly without any warning. These changes might open the door for some things and slam the door for others. The more flexible you are with your goals, the better they can accommodate life's unpredictability. And I think that's like, we don't know what comes our way. We didn't anticipate this year. We couldn't have predicted it. And we have to be flexible. And the more rigid we are, the more likely we are to break. And so I think that's, my hope for my kids is that they have standards and goals from themselves, but that they're not so, hyper focused on an expectation that might quite frankly be out of their control.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think the kind of to wrap things up, let's see, there's a comment from Amy. Read. It says, I'm sad that my kid talks with her friends on the phone for hours every day and spends less time at the dining table talking with us. Is it normal? Should I let go of the expectation that she talks with me about her life every day? This is such a good one, Amy. I was actually reading a little bit about this last night, and we have expectations that our kids share with us. I have expectations that I'll always be my kid's best friend. And when he or one of them doesn't want to talk to me, it hurts me a lot. Like, I feel like I did something wrong. And, I think just to know that everything's always changing, everything's evolving. It's very common for teenagers to be hyper focused on their friends. I remember this time where my parents planned this trip to San Francisco. I was probably 13 years old, and they had planned dinner and we were going to have a wonderful day. But all I wanted to do was spend time with my friends in my neighborhood. And I was such bad company that day because I didn't want to be there. And my parents, their expectation was that we were going to have a wonderful time, but that's not where I was in that moment. And I pretty much ruined the trip for everybody and I feel terrible about it. And of course, now I would do anything to like spend the day with my parents. But I think that is part of being a teenager, that your friends are going to be your priority at that time. I mean, doesn't mean that your kids love you any less, but I think it is fair to say that, yeah, we have to let go of that. There's, dining table rules. Like I don't let my kids be on the phone at the dining table, just in general. So we have some control over that. But even if we took their phone away, does that mean that they're going to engage in conversation with you? We don't really have control over that. And so I think just,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it is normal behavior. I mean, that's very typical teenage behavior. I guess the suggestion I would have, Amy, is the times that your kid does or your daughter does actually does talk to you, tell her how much you love that. And, thank her for it. And tell her how much you appreciate her that she did that. And so that she knows that you value that. And then she's going to be more likely to do it. I have found that with my kid. My daughter made this comment once, oh, you must hate it when I come in and I bug you at night because I'm usually reading my book and she'll come in and she interrupts me. And I'm like, no, I love it when you do that. Do it anytime. I love that time. And she was like, oh, you do? That's so sweet. And it was just so me telling her, she was she didn't realize that that was actually special time to me. And so share that with your child, and don't make a big deal about it and put a lot of pressure on them and that you're super sad when they don't do it, but let them know that you appreciate that.
Yes. And when they do that, if your kid does take the time to talk to you, make sure that you're really listening.
Yes.
If we're just giving advice, and this isn't for you directly, Amy, this is for all of us, right? This is if my kid comes to me and tells me about their day and a problem that's going on, I know I say this all the time, but it's my go-to. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to give you advice? Or do you want me to be mad at somebody with you? Which is it? And it's usually, I want you, Mom, to listen to me. And the more that I give them the freedom to talk without interrupting them, the more they come back. So I love that I have 3 teenage boys. They all jump in my bed when I get home from work and we all just kind of talk. And I just listen because I don't want that to stop. I'm so grateful that happens. And so, letting go of the expectations that she's going to tell you everything about her life, but really cherishing the moments she does and giving her the freedom and the space to share, I think.
Yeah. And sometimes your kids talk to you about important stuff and you're so grateful that they're talking to you. And sometimes my son talks to me about his Fortnite character and that's what he wants to talk about. But I still listen to all right, yeah, great. Let's talk about this because I'm knowing I'm opening up that space that at some point he may talk to me about something more important.
I love that. Yeah, there's so many things that I'm oh, I have to listen to this or watch this again. I watch a video about this farmer who has emus with my son because that's his favorite thing. It's not really my thing, but I think you said that having that time opens up the dialogue even further. So just being there and, enjoying it, enjoying the moments and not expecting things to be perfect in life, but, being flexible and, I think that's the best thing we could do for ourselves, for our sanity and for the people that we love.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and, Amy, I'm totally with you. It's hard. When they don't want to talk to you and they just talk to their friends and they're like, oh, but I want to share with you. They will. They just do it on their time. So
I want to be their number one always, and I know that's not going to be.
Yeah. Circling back to when Yvonne was talking about parenting is not always fun and not always great. Those are the times that it's not great. It's totally acceptable to say that's the part of parenting that sucks. When you're sitting there waiting for your kid to acknowledge you, that's not fun times.
Exactly.
That's okay. All right. Well, thank you for the parents that joined us tonight. Thank you today. Thank you, Yvonne. This was a really great topic. I love this topic. I could talk about this for hours, but I have many more meetings to do today, so I can't talk about this for hours.
Same. All right, everyone. Have a good
All right.
day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.